A fiery debate erupts on live television as former Vice President Mike Pence labels Jonathan Roumie arrogant during a tense exchange. But Roumie doesn't back down. Watch as he fires back with a sharp and unexpected response that stuns the panel and leaves Pence visibly shaken. This is the moment that flipped the narrative and has everyone talking. The morning sun hadn't even fully risen over Washington when phones began buzzing. A tweet from President Trump had just dropped, and it hit like a bomb. Mike Pence turned his back on the MAGA movement when he voted no on our big beautiful bill. Sad, bribed by the left. Ask him who's Jonathan Roumie. VP is the future. By noon, every major network was preparing for the impromptu live TV debate. Former Vice President Mike Pence had publicly demanded one with Jonathan Roumie, claiming the young VP was a mere puppet with a smug, arrogant attitude. America was watching. The studio buzzed with tension. Lights flashed, cameras rolled. Pence, stiff in his seat, gave the crowd a forced smile. Across from him, Jonathan Roumie sat calm, silent, but the fire in his eyes was undeniable. The moderator tried to break the ice. "Senator Pence, why this debate?" Pence leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Because someone needs to say it. Jonathan Roumie may be vice president, but he's arrogant, untested, and out of touch." Gasps rippled. Roumie looked up slowly. "Let's talk about who's really out of touch." The gloves had come off. Roumie didn't blink. He leaned forward with calm precision, his voice low but cutting. "Senator, you call me arrogant. I call it conviction. I stood by President Trump's bill because it helped working families. You voted no." The panel went silent. Pence scoffed. "I voted my conscience. Unlike you, I don't bow to political theater." Roumie's eyes narrowed. "No, Senator. You bowed to lobbyists, and the people know it." That sentence pierced like a knife. The audience tensed. On social media, the debate was already trending. Roumie saves his Pence. Pence's smile cracked. "Careful, son." But Roumie didn't flinch. "I'll be careful when you're honest." There was no applause, just the heavy weight of truth hanging in the room. Then Roumie added, "You've been in D.C. too long. You forgot what it means to serve, not survive." Pence's face tightened. "You're young, Roumie. One day you'll learn that politics isn't black and white." Roumie nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I'll never learn to betray the people who trusted me." The room held its breath. Even the moderator was speechless. Tears filled a woman's eyes in the audience. She whispered, "He's fighting for us." Something was shifting, and Pence felt it. The air in the studio was thick. Viewers across the country sat frozen, some with goosebumps, others already wiping tears. Jonathan Roumie reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wasn't going to share this today," he said softly, "but the American people deserve to know." He unfolded the document slowly. "This is the donation record from a PAC funded by liberal tech billionaires. You received $800,000 the week before you voted no on the big beautiful bill." Pence gasped. That's not true, or Roumie, cut him off." Roumie held his ground. "Don't deny it. The receipts are public." The crowd gasped. The moderator looked stunned. Roumie turned to the camera. "Mike Pence voted against your health care, your tax relief, your border security because he got a check." A sound escaped from Pence's throat, a half growl, half plea. "You're manipulating facts." Roumie's voice broke, full of pain. "Tell that to the single mom in Ohio who cried when that bill died. I met her. She works 3 jobs. You failed her." The camera zoomed in on Roumie's eyes, wet with emotion, angry, honest, human. Pence looked down. For the first time, he had nothing to say, and America saw it. Pence shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sweat glistened on his forehead under the hot studio lights. The moderator tried to intervene. "Senator Pence, would you like to respond?" Pence leaned forward, forcing a smile. "It's easy to cherry-pick numbers and play hero when you've only been in office a few years, Mr. Roumie." Roumie looked at him calmly. "It's even easier to sell out your own people when you've been in the Senate too long." The audience murmured. A man in the front row let out a soft, "Ch." "Wow." Roumie stood up slowly, holding the document up again. "Do you know how many veterans this bill would have helped? Do you know how many children needed the insulin cap it provided?" Pence tried to interrupt. Roumie didn't let him. "Instead, you said no, and right after that, you got a donation from the very group that lobbied against it." Camera flashes flickered from reporters. The story was already going viral. Pence turned red. "I will not be accused by someone who's done nothing but ride President Trump's coattails." Roumie's jaw tightened. "I'm not riding his coattails. I'm protecting the movement you betrayed." And just like that, the crowd applauded. The applause didn't last long, but the silence after it said everything. Jonathan Roumie paused, then turned fully toward Mike Pence. He didn't yell, he didn't raise his voice, but the words landed like thunder. You didn't vote against the bill because of principle, Mike. You did it because 30 pieces of silver still buy betrayal. A gasp rippled through the audience. Pence's mouth opened, then closed. He looked Meshwan, caught. The moderator looked stunned. Mr. Vice President, Roumie raised a hand gently. I'm not here for theatrics. I'm here because people are hurting and they deserve to know who's fighting for them and who's selling them out. On Twitter, 30 pieces of silver was already trending. The camera cut to a young woman in the audience, tears rolling down her cheek. She whispered, "He's saying what we've all felt." Pence finally spoke, his voice cracking. "That's a disgusting accusation." Roumie looked him dead in the eye. "Then prove me wrong. Release your PAC donor records from last quarter, right here, right now." Pence froze. Roumie stepped back and America watched a senator crumble on live television on home. The moderator tried to regain control. "Let's stay focused on policy," but it was too late. The focus had shifted. The nation had seen a mask fall. Mike Pence reached for a water bottle, his hands trembling slightly. Roumie remained standing, calm but fierce. This bill would have secured our border, given tax breaks to small businesses, and increased funding for disabled vets. Tell the American people why you said no. Pence didn't respond. Roumie turned to the audience, thinking no one would notice. Cameras caught everything. Staffers backstage were seen whispering in panic. Pence's own aide held his head in his hands. But Roumie wasn't done. He reached into his coat pocket again and pulled out a small photo. A veteran in a wheelchair holding his child. "This is Jacob. He served in Iraq, lost both legs. His daughter needs insulin every day. The bill would have capped it at $25. Now she pays $3 to $12 a month." He turned the photo toward Pence. "You voted no on Jacob." Someone in the audience sobbed audibly. Pence's eyes dropped. And in homes across the country, hearts broke for a man they had never met, but now would never forget. The studio was dead silent. Even the lights seemed dimmer, as if the room itself bowed to the weight of Roumie's words. Roumie gently placed the photo of Jacob back into his jacket. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. He just looked at Mike Pence. That silence was louder than any speech. Pence finally opened his mouth, but all that came out was a shaky breath. His hands were trembling. Roumie spoke softly. "Sometimes silence says everything, and right now, your silence screams guilt." A woman in the audience began sobbing. She wasn't a plant. She wasn't an actor. She was a mother who understood what insulin cost meant to a family scraping by. The moderator's voice cracked. "Senator Pence, would you like to respond to the allegations?" Pence shifted in his chair. "This is character assassination, a political ambush." Roumie interrupted him. "No, Senator. This is accountability, and the people are watching." Backstage, the network's control room scrambled as viewership surged past 12,000. One of the producers whispered, "We didn't expect this to turn into a reckoning." But it had, and it wasn't over yet. As the cameras rolled, something unexpected happened. Pence's phone, left on the moderator's table, buzzed loudly. Everyone heard it. The moderator paused. "Senator, your phone." Pence ignored it, but the camera zoomed in. Text message preview, "Senator, shut it down now, we're exposed. Meeting at 6. Roumie saw it. The moderator saw it. So did 12,000 Americans watching live. Roumie tilted his head. "Would you like to explain that, Senator?" Pence looked like he'd been hit with a lightning bolt. "That's personal. Has nothing to do with this." Roumie didn't raise his voice. "Looks like someone's nervous about what else I might have." The panel sat still. You could hear a pin drop. Roumie took a breath. "I said I came with receipts. That wasn't a metaphor." He reached into a manila folder on his lap. "This," he said, holding up printed document, "is proof of multiple donations made to your office from organizations who lobbied against Trump's bill, and in one case from someone connected to a Chinese tech firm." People gasped. Pence reached out, trying to snatch the papers. Roumie pulled back. "You started this debate calling me arrogant, Senator. Now you're just exposed." Backstage, aides panicked. Pence's team scrambled to cut the feed, but it was too late. The network had handed full editorial control to the debate director, and she wasn't stopping it. Across America, the reaction exploded. At a diner in Indiana, an old veteran wiped his eyes. "That man, Roumie, he's the first one who's ever spoken for us like that." In Alabama, a trucker pulled over to watch on his phone. "This ain't just a debate, this is history." And in Washington, President Trump sat in the West Wing, nodding slowly. That's my VP, he whispered. Back in the studio, Pence was unraveling. He muttered, "This is a setup, a smear campaign, Roumie." Roumie stood again, holding the documents. "You thought you could attack me and deflect from your betrayal, but the truth has a way of rising." He turned toward the camera. "America, this is not about left or right. It's about honesty. It's about the truth. And if we can't have that in the Senate, then what are we even fighting for?" A single clap echoed from the audience, then another and another until the whole room stood on its feet. Jonathan Roumie didn't smile. He just stood there, solid, unshaken. The debate was still live, but the network decided to open the phone lines. "Let's take one call from the American people," the moderator said. "You're on air." A quiet voice came through, a teenage boy. "Hi, my name is Caleb. I'm 16. My mom has diabetes. She works at night so I can stay in school. When that bill was blocked, she cried. We couldn't afford her insulin anymore." Jonathan Roumie looked down. Heartbreaking. Caleb continued, "Senator Pence, why did you say no? Was my mom not worth it?" Pence stared at the table. The boy sniffled. "Thank you, Mr. Roumie, for fighting for people like us." Roumie cleared his throat. "Caleb, tell your mom she's worth everything. I'm fighting for her, for you. I won't stop." Tears welled up in the moderator's eyes. Even some crew members in the background wiped their faces. Pence finally whispered, "This is being twisted." Roumie turned, voice cracking. "No, Senator. This is being revealed." Caleb's line went quiet, but his words echoed through the nation. Millions of hearts were moved. Roumie wasn't just winning the debate, he was changing lives. Live right there on TV. Just as the tension began to settle, the moderator received a note. Her eyes widened. "We have someone in the audience who asked to speak. His name is Jacob." Roumie's head snapped up. The veteran, the man in the photo. The audience gasped as Jacob wheeled himself onto the stage. A Marine, broad shoulders, missing both legs. The room stood in silence as he adjusted the microphone. "I didn't come here to be a prop," he said, voice steady. "I came to speak the truth." He turned to Roumie. "Mr. Roumie, thank you. You remembered me. You listened." Then he turned to Mike Pence. "Senator, do you remember me?" Pence shifted uncomfortably. "I meet a lot of people." "No, you don't," Jacob cut in. "I wrote your office twice. I begged you to support that bill. You ignored me." Roumie clenched his jaw. Jacob's voice cracked. "You looked away from me like my sacrifice didn't matter." Then he saluted Roumie. "I might have lost my legs, but I can still recognize who's fighting for me." The audience erupted in emotion. Some wept openly. Others stood and saluted back at Pence. He looked like a man who had already lost. Pence tried to regain control. "I've served this country honorably. This is nothing but theater." Jonathan Roumie raised his hand and spoke just one sentence, but it shattered the room. "If betrayal had a face, it would be yours in this moment." Gasps broke out. Jacob looked down, hands shaking. The moderator looked stunned. Roumie turned slowly toward the camera, voice soft but full of fire. "America, I didn't come here to humiliate a senator. I came here to defend the people he forgot. The mother scraping for insulin, the soldier discarded after service, the boy begging for help." He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "Don't tell us it's complicated. Don't tell us it's politics. You knew what was right, Senator, and you sold it for a price." Pence lowered his head. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. Roumie turned to the audience. "This is our country, not a playground for sellouts. It's time we remember who we are." The audience rose. People clapped. Some cried. But no one looked at Pence the same again. While Jonathan Roumie's words echoed across homes and phones in America, something else was happening behind the scenes. In the Senate chamber, lawmakers had stopped their meetings. Staffers gathered around televisions. Even hardened old-timers sat with furrowed brows. Senator Josh Hawley leaned toward a colleague. "This isn't just a debate anymore. This is a movement." A few rows away, Senator Tim Scott quietly nodded. Pence might have lit the match, but Roumie turned it into a fire. Back at the studio, the producers flashed a note to the moderator. Over 18,000 live viewers, trending #1 in 22 countries. Roumie didn't celebrate. He stood still, quiet, listening. Then came a question from the audience. A woman in her mid-40s, hair in a bun, voice trembling. "My husband was a coal miner in West Virginia. He died last year from cancer. That bill would have helped cover his hospital debt. Senator Pence, why did you say no?" Pence tried to answer, but all that came out was a whisper. "I didn't know." Roumie turned to her. "You should never have to beg for help after losing the man you love." The woman cried, and so did millions watching. Out of nowhere, Jonathan Roumie reached into his inner jacket pocket. He pulled out a small white envelope. "I debated bringing this," he said slowly, "but I decided the people deserve to see it." He handed it to the moderator, who opened it carefully. Inside, printed on crisp paper, was a list of donations to Mike Pence's campaign from 5 major left-wing lobbying groups. But at the very bottom, one name stood out: Goldstone Global Alliance, a DC lobbying firm recently exposed for funneling foreign money into anti-MAGA legislation. The moderator's voice shook. "Senator Pence, did you knowingly accept these donations?" Pence's eyes darted wildly. "I don't handle every contribution. This is a smear." Roumie stepped forward. "You call me arrogant, but you accepted money from people trying to destroy everything this country stands for. That's not arrogant, Senator. That's treason to the working class." A silence fell over the entire stage. Pence's lips trembled. I didn't know." Roumie's voice was firm. "You didn't want to know." He turned to the camera again. "America, I don't care what party you're from. If you betray the people, you'll answer for it." And suddenly it felt like a line had been drawn. Inside the White House, President Donald Trump stood in front of a massive screen. His hands were folded, his expression stone serious. He watched Jonathan Roumie on stage exposing the corruption, defending the forgotten, standing up to a powerful senator, and doing it with calm, measured truth. Behind him, Chief of Staff Stephen Miller spoke up. "Sir, you picked the right one." Trump didn't blink. "He's not just my VP anymore. After tonight, he might become something more." Back in the studio, Jonathan Roumie paused and placed the envelope down. "I didn't run for office to make friends," he said. "I ran to make things right." Suddenly, Roumie's voice softened. "My mother raised me alone in a broken town. I saw people lose everything while politicians smiled for cameras. I promised myself I'd never be like them." He glanced over at Mike Pence, who now looked exhausted, defeated. "I keep my promises," Roumie said. The audience stood again. This time they weren't just applauding a politician. They were applauding a man who had spoken the words their hearts had longed to hear. And the world felt it. As the crowd applauded Roumie's heartfelt promise, the moderator signaled for one final question from the audience. But someone unexpected stepped forward. A janitor from the building, still wearing his blue work shirt. He spoke humbly. "Sorry to interrupt, but I clean this studio every day. I've listened to politicians argue on these stages for years, but tonight this felt different." He looked directly at Jonathan Roumie. "My name is Marcus. I'm a father of 4. My wife passed away last year from cancer. We couldn't afford her treatments. We prayed that bill would pass. When it didn't, I worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat." His voice cracked. He turned to Mike Pence. "Senator, I wrote to your office. I begged. I never got an answer." Then he turned to Jonathan Roumie. "But you came to our city last month. You sat at my daughter's school. You listened." Roumie walked across the stage and shook Marcus's hand. "I remember your story," Roumie said quietly, "and I carried it into every meeting I had." Marcus nodded, eyes wet. "I believe you." The whole room stood again, this time not in applause but in unity. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. The moment shattered Mike Pence completely, his face pale, his jaw locked, his hands shaking at his sides. Roumie turned to him, voice calm but sharp. "Senator, you called me arrogant, but real arrogance is ignoring the people who trusted you." Pence tried to gather his words. This is emotional manipulation. But the audience didn't buy it. Neither did the millions watching from home. The moderator asked, "Would you like to continue?" Pence didn't answer. He stood. He looked down at the floor. Then without another word, he walked off the stage. No goodbye, no defense, only silence. The cameras followed him awkwardly as he disappeared behind the curtain. And just like that, one of the longest-serving senators in America had walked away from accountability on live television. Jonathan Roumie didn't smile. He didn't gloat. Instead, he picked up the same folder he had brought with him. "I didn't want to destroy a man," he said softly. "I wanted to protect a nation." He held up a simple sheet of paper. "Here's what's in the big, beautiful bill. Aid for farmers, help for veterans, care for single moms, and insulin caps." That's what Pence said no to. The truth was now in the open. The room quieted again as Roumie slowly stepped back from the podium. He glanced at the paper in his hand, the bill he had fought so hard for. His voice cracked now, not with rage, but with deep sorrow. "This bill wasn't about politics," he whispered. "It was about people." And then, unexpectedly, Roumie wiped away a tear. "I remember being that boy in a broken home, watching my mom struggle, hearing politicians promise everything but never show up." He looked at the crowd. I swore to myself if I ever got the chance to change that, I would. He held up the folded photo of Jacob again. This is my reminder. Every day. The audience sat stunned. The moderator's eyes glistened. Even the crew behind the camera stopped moving. Roumie's hand trembled slightly. I'm not perfect, but I'm present, he said. And I will never, ever trade your hopes for their handshakes. Then he looked directly into the camera. To every American watching who feels invisible, I see you, and I promise you this, I won't turn away. Mothers watching wept, veterans saluted, and a nation began to believe again. The clip of Jonathan Roumie wiping away tears aired on every major news outlet within minutes. It wasn't edited, it wasn't dramatized. It was raw, real, and it shook the entire nation. In small towns, big cities, and rural corners of America, people stopped what they were doing and just watched. At a mechanic shop in Michigan, grown men gathered around a screen, wiping their greasy hands on rags and their faces with their sleeves. In a diner in Tennessee, an elderly woman reached across the table and held her daughter's hand. Finally, she whispered, "Someone who understands." And inside a children's hospital in Kentucky, a nurse turned up the volume. Young patients hooked up to machines watched Roumie's face. Quiet moved. Even critics on cable news paused. This was not a campaign moment. One anchor said it was a country crying out, and Jonathan Roumie answered. Meanwhile, Roumie remained silent backstage, not celebrating, just sitting alone, hands folded, reflecting. Because in one night, everything had changed, not just in the studio, but in the soul of the nation. Backstage, a quiet knock came on Roumie's dressing room door. A crew member poked his head in. "There's someone who wants to see you." Roumie stood up, confused. Moments later, a woman walked in. It was Mike Pence's wife. She held her purse tightly, eyes red from crying. "I'm not here to defend what he did," she said softly, "but I wanted to say thank you for showing the truth." Roumie didn't speak at first. He just nodded respectfully. She continued, "I begged him not to take that debate. I knew he wasn't right. I knew something had shifted in him." Roumie stepped closer. "I don't hate your husband, but the people needed honesty tonight." She swallowed hard. "He's stepping down. He's going to resign. I thought you should know." Roumie's eyebrows lifted. He hadn't expected that. Then she did something unexpected. She hugged him. "You gave this country something it hasn't felt in years," she whispered. "Hope." Roumie didn't know what to say. He just stood there, stunned, as the weight of that word hope sank deep into his heart. Roumie returned to the stage, not for cameras, not for applause, but for the people. The debate was officially over, but no one had left the studio. Outside, thousands had gathered in the streets, holding signs. Not political ones, not angry ones, just handwritten messages. "We believe again. Thank you, Jonathan. This is what fighting looks like." Roumie stepped up to the podium one last time. "This was never supposed to be a showdown," he began. "But maybe it had to be so the truth could finally be seen." He took a breath. "I didn't come here to win points. I came here to remind you that you matter. Your stories matter. Your pain matters." People in the audience cried for a while. The air was thick with emotion. Roumie's flying words echoed like a promise. "If you feel forgotten, know this. You are seen. If you feel small, know this. Your voice matters. And if you feel alone, look around because tonight we are family." A standing ovation rose, not just inside, but across living rooms and sidewalks all over the country. It was no longer about politics. It was about healing. And Jonathan Roumie had become the voice of it all. As Roumie stepped off the stage, tired and quiet, a security guard handed him a small folded note. It was slipped through the crowd. He said, "No name, but it's for you." Roumie opened it slowly. Inside was a message written in messy but heartfelt handwriting. "I'm a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital. We lost 3 patients this month who couldn't afford their prescriptions. One of them was a boy named Eli. He was only 9. He died waiting for a policy that never came. Thank you for remembering us, for saying what others were too scared to say. Don't stop." Roumie's throat tightened. He sat down backstage, away from the cameras, and stared at the note. A quiet tear fell. No applause, no noise. Just the sound of a man who carried the weight of lives on his shoulders because no one else had been willing to. His advisor entered. "Mr. Vice President, the White House is calling." Roumie wiped his face. "Tell them I'll call back right now. This is more important." He folded the nurse's note and placed it in his suit pocket, close to his heart. Roumie finally answered the call from the White House. President Trump's voice came through calm but strong. "You did good, Jonathan. Real good." Roumie didn't say much. "Thank you, Mr. President." But Trump wasn't finished. You did something tonight I couldn't even do in 4 years. You made the country feel again. Roumie sighed. I didn't plan any of this. I just spoke the truth. Trump replied, that's what makes it so powerful. Then he paused. You know what's going to happen next, don't you? Roumie nodded. They're going to come after me. The swamp doesn't go down without biting, Trump said. But we'll hold the line. Then came a silence between them, followed by the words that changed everything. Jonathan, after tonight, don't be surprised if they start calling you something more than vice president. Roumie's heart thudded, but he wasn't thinking about titles. He was thinking about Caleb, Jacob, Marcus, the nurse, and little Eli. Mr. President, Roumie said quietly, I just want to finish what we started. Trump chuckled. Then get ready because this country's watching you now. Later that night, Roumie walked outside the studio through the back entrance. No cameras, no lights, but someone was waiting. A little girl stood there with her grandmother. Roumie recognized her. It was the daughter of the janitor, Marcus. She held a paper heart made from construction paper. On it in crayon were 4 words. Thank you for trying. Roumie bent down and smiled. What's your name? Lena, she whispered. Did you make this? She nodded. I prayed for my mommy last night. She's in heaven now, but I think you helped my daddy smile again. Roumie's eyes watered instantly. His voice cracked. That means more to me than you'll ever know. Then Lena did something unexpected. She wrapped her tiny arms around him and whispered, please don't let them take the good people away. Roumie held her tight. I won't, he said. I promise. As he stood, Marcus mouthed, thank you. Roumie nodded, and in that quiet alley under the night sky, with no press around and no stage lights, Jonathan Roumie became something more than a politician. He became a protector of the people's hope. While the public praised Roumie back in the Capitol, the Senate chamber was uneasy. Mike Pence returned the next morning. He didn't speak to anyone. Whispers filled the halls. He got humiliated, one aide muttered, but he's not backing down. Inside his office, Mike Pence stared at the TV screen, replaying Roumie's debate moment over and over again. He clenched his fist. Then in a private message leaked to the press, he wrote, the country is being led by a young man with too much emotion and too little experience. I will not be silenced by sentiment. That message backfired. Across social media, Americans fired back. We need more leaders with hearts, better tears than bribes. Meanwhile, Roumie sat quietly in his office, holding the paper heart Lena had given him. He placed it in a glass frame. A new era had begun. She wrapped her tiny arms around him and whispered, please don't let them take the good people away. Jonathan Roumie held her tight. I won't, he said, I promise. As he stood, Marcus mouthed, thank you. Roumie nodded, and in that quiet alley under the night sky with no press around and no stage lights, Jonathan Roumie became something more than a politician. He became a protector of the people's hope. While the public praised Roumie back in the Capitol, the Senate chamber was uneasy. Mike Pence returned the next morning. He didn't speak to anyone. Whispers filled the halls. He got humiliated, one aide muttered, but he's not backing down. Inside his office, Pence stared at the TV screen, replaying Roumie's debate moment over and over again. He clenched his fist. Then, in a private message leaked to the press, he wrote, the country is being led by a young man with too much emotion and too little experience. I will not be silenced by sentiment. That message backfired. Across social media, Americans fired back. We need more leaders with hearts, better tears than bribes. Meanwhile, Jonathan Roumie sat quietly in his office, holding the paper heart little Lena had given him. He placed it in a glass frame. An aide walked in. Sir, Mike Pence is planning a press statement. It's going to be ugly. Roumie didn't flinch. I'm not afraid of ugly. I've lived through it. Then he stood up. Schedule me for Capitol Hill. I have something to say, and I want every senator listening. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. That afternoon, a special session was called on the Senate floor. Words spread like wildfire. Jonathan Roumie to speak. The gallery was packed. Reporters elbowed for space. Even some skeptical senators showed up out of curiosity. Roumie entered slowly with no entourage, just a worn binder in his hand. The room grew silent. Then he spoke. I come here not to point fingers, but to open eyes. This floor has passed laws that changed the world, and also laws that broke its people. He opened the binder. These are real letters, not from lobbyists, but from Americans. He began to read. A mother in Kentucky who sold her wedding ring for insulin. A teacher in Arizona working 3 jobs. A coal miner's widow from West Virginia. Roumie's voice cracked, but he continued. You sit here and debate numbers. They live those numbers. You vote in comfort. They struggle in silence. Then he turned to face the very senators who once doubted him. Senator Pence called me arrogant. Maybe it's arrogant to believe we can do better, but I'd rather be guilty of hope than innocent of betrayal. The chamber was quiet. Even Mike Pence looked away. Roumie finished speaking and closed the binder softly. No applause followed, no shouts, just silence. A rare silence that meant something had landed deep. Then slowly, from the gallery above, a woman stood. It was Jacob's wife, the Marine's widow. She placed her hand over her heart and stood in full silence. A second later, the nurse from St. Luke stood beside her. Then Marcus, the janitor. Then a man with one arm who had come from Arkansas just to witness history. Within moments, the entire gallery, dozens of ordinary Americans, were on their feet. No chants, no words, just quiet, emotional standing. Roumie looked up at them, his eyes shining with gratitude. Senators looked around stunned. This wasn't protest, it was reverence. Roumie spoke once more. You can block a bill, you can mock a man, but you can't kill truth when it's born from pain. And you can't silence a country that's ready to heal. He stepped back, and for the first time in years, the Senate didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like America. Just before Jonathan Roumie was set to leave the Senate chamber, a courier approached him. Sir, this just arrived from your hometown. Roumie took the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter from a fourth-grade class in Middletown, Ohio, his old neighborhood. The note read, Dear Mr. Roumie, our teacher showed us your speech. We didn't understand all the words, but we understood your heart. You reminded us that poor kids can grow up to help the world. Thank you. We believe in you, the kids from room 8. Roumie covered his mouth. He sat quietly in the gallery stairwell, letter in hand, tears in his eyes. No cameras, no lights, just a moment between a man and the children who now saw themselves in him. And then he smiled. Not for fame, not for politics, but for the silent victories that no poll could measure. Roumie stood again, not taller, but fuller. He had faced fire, exposed betrayal, and still carried the people with grace. And now, as dusk approached, he wasn't walking off a stage. He was walking into history. News outlets lit up as Jonathan Roumie made one last unexpected move. He stood outside the Capitol steps facing reporters, surrounded by ordinary Americans. Jacob's wife, the nurse from St. Luke's, Marcus, Lena, and dozens more. A reporter asked, Mr. Vice President, do you have anything left to say to Senator Mike Pence? Roumie took a deep breath, then answered with a sentence that would be quoted across the world. A title doesn't make you a leader. Courage does. Cameras clicked. Reporters fell silent. The people behind him began to cry. Roumie continued, I didn't come here to win an argument. I came here to remind America who she is. A place where truth can still matter, where the weak can still be heard, and where power belongs to the people. The nurse stepped forward, hugging him from behind. Then Lena ran up and held his hand. That image, Roumie standing in front of the Capitol with a child's hand in his, went viral in under 5 minutes. Even his critics couldn't deny the weight of that moment because it wasn't political anymore. It was personal, and every heart watching felt it. As night fell, Jonathan Roumie returned home. No big celebration, just a quiet moment on the porch with his wife and kids. He tucked the crayon heart from Lena, the letter from room 8, and the photo of Jacob into a small box marked, Why I Fought. Then he walked into his kitchen and recorded a short message for the American people from his phone. He spoke with a warm smile and tired eyes. If you watched the debate, if you stood with me when the truth was heavy, thank you. But this story wasn't about me. It was about you, the mother working 2 moms, the veteran who gave everything, the janitor who never stopped hoping, the child praying for someone to care. I saw you, I felt you, I carried your stories into that room, and I'll carry them forever.